In the previous class, we have learned about while loops, which are very helpful in executing a block of codes in a repetitive fashion, again and again, until an exit condition is met. In this class, we will learn about another very useful loop structure in Python, called for loops. Let us first delete this while loop part, so we can try something more interesting here. We have a subject list here, which contains 4 different items. Let us say, we want to display these subject names in capitalized form, or in uppercase letters. So, we have to access each of these items one by one. We can do that using a for loop. The basic structure is very simple. We will say for subject, in subjects. Then a colon. Here, we need to give a list or a sequence. Python will iterate through the items in this list, one by one, with this field called subject. Here, subject is just a simple variable. We can use any other name also, instead of this. Just to make it more meaningful, we are using the name subject. It has no relation to this subjects because this is a list, and this is just another variable. Python will pick up one item in each iteration from this list, and will assign that item's value to this variable. Pretty simple. So, after the colon, we need to start a code block which will be executed in a loop. We will say print subject dot upper. Here upper is a function. It will change the content of this string variable, subject, into uppercase letters. As the loop runs, it will pick up one item at a time from the list, into this subject field, and the upper function will give us the uppercase format. We have to now close this bracket of the print function. And we are done. Let us run this code. So, we can see that all the items are capitalized and listed one by one. It goes through this loop 4 times, and picks up the items one at a time, and converts them into uppercase letters. However, although it displays them as capitalized, it does not change the original list items. We can also verify this. Just after this loop ends, let us print the list through print subjects. It will display the original list. If we run this now, we can see that the items are displayed as capitalized, but the original list is not changed. It remained exactly same as defined initially. If we want the original list items to be permanently modified within this for loop, we will need to use another form of this loop. So let us look at the other format, which is also very useful in some cases. We write for count. Here, this count is again just a variable name. You can use any name in place of count. In range. This range is a function which takes an integer number as input. We have to pass the number of items present in the target list. In our case, we will say for. This range function actually returns a list of numbers, starting from 0 up to this number. So it will give us a sequence 0, 1, 2, and 3. The for loop will iterate through this sequence, and one sequence number from this sequence will be assigned to this variable in each iteration. So, this count variable will get a value of 0 in the first iteration, then 1, then 2, and then 3, in the successive iterations. Now, we will put a colon at the end and start the code block for this loop. We will access each item of the subjects list. So, we will write subjects, then within the square brackets, count. Count is the index here. Equals to the same, subjects, count, dot, upper. So we will access the items of this subjects list, with this count variable. Change it into uppercase letters, and assign it back to that item itself. So, this will change the original values of the list items. Okay. Now, we will display the list to verify if it is changed. So we will write print, then subjects. Here, this print statement falls under the for loop, because it has this indentation. If we only need the final result, we can remove this indentation. But let us keep the indentation so that we can see the incremental progress within the list, as we go through each iteration. Another thing here. In this range function, instead of a hard-coded value, we can also pass the length of the target list. We have used this in the previous class, the len function. Len, subjects. It will automatically calculate the length of the list we mentioned, which is 4, and it will use that in order to generate the number sequence. Let us now run this. So we can see in the first iteration of the loop, only physics is capitalized. Math in the second iteration, chem in the third, and lastly bio got capitalized. And then, this final print shows that the original list itself is changed. That is because we have assigned the uppercase subjects back to the list items. So these are two different styles of for loop. In one style, we directly iterate through the items of a list or any sequence of objects. And in the other case, we use this range function to generate a sequence of integers and then iterate through that sequence. Now we will discuss how to write one for loop within another for loop. We call it a nested for loop. For that, let us delete this code and we will take a different example. Let us consider this numbers list. We will take each item of this list in a loop and verify if it is a prime number or not. First we will write for number in numbers. This will iterate through each item of the numbers list. And in each iteration, it will assign one of these numbers to the number variable. You know this is just a variable, you can use any name here. So we will get one number in this variable each time the loop runs, and we have to only verify if this number is prime or not. Now within this loop, we will first declare a flag, just a variable called prime. Equals to true. This makes this variable a Boolean variable, which can have two possible values, either true or false. We will then start another for loop for count in range number. This will generate a sequence from 0 to this number. We know that a number is a prime number if it is not divisible by any other number, so we are generating this sequence of numbers in order to divide the given number one by each number smaller than the number itself. So within this inner loop, we need to check the divisibility. If the number in discussion %count, we are dividing the number variable with this count variable, which will run through 0 to 1 less than this number, and we know from the previous classes that % operator gives the remainder, so we will check if it equals to 0, then the number is divisible. It makes the number a non-prime. So right within this if clause, we will reset the prime flag. Prime equals to false. But there are two problems here. The first problem is, this range function will generate a sequence from 0 to this number. But in prime number calculation, we don't need 0 or 1, because division by 0 will raise an error, and all numbers are anyway divisible by 1. So we need to start from number 2, up to 1 less than this number. The good thing is, we can also pass another number as the start point for the range function. It will start from this 2, and will go up to 1 less than this number. That is exactly what we need. Now, once this inner loop is over, and it comes out, we will check if the prime flag is still true or not. So, we will go back on the indentation, so that we are just out of the inner loop, but within the outer loop block. Then we will check if prime. Prime is a Boolean variable, so we just check the flag itself, no comparison is needed. If this flag is still true, we will print number, and then a message. Is a prime number. Quote end in bracket end. And in the else part, we will say print number is not a prime. So we are running a for loop within another for loop, and we are checking for each number if the prime flag is true or not. Let us now run this code. So, we can see a perfect output. It correctly displays which number is a prime and which number is not. This is how a nested for loop works. We can make two performance improvements in this logic. First, we don't need to divide our target number with all the numbers in this sequence. It is enough to go up to the square root of this number. But for that, we need to import the math module. Let us keep it simple. We will just use half of this number to get our sequence. This simple step will cut down the execution time by half. Secondly, once we get a perfect divisor for our target number, once this prime flag is set to false, we don't need to continue this inner for loop anymore. We need to continue the outer for if we have more items in the original list, but this inner for loop is no longer needed. This number is already proved to be non-prime, so we can jump to the conclusion and pick up the next item from the list. So, for better coding and faster execution, as soon as we get this flag set to false, we will say break. This break will stop the inner loop. We have seen its use earlier. It will come out here. We don't need to perform the rest of the divisions. Well, this code will throw an error. You can pause the video here and think over it. Otherwise, let us just run it. At line number 10, it throws an error. It says, float object cannot be interpreted as an integer. Let us go to line number 10. This division by 2 will give a fraction when this number is an odd number. But the range function accepts only an integer value. So, we have to typecast this value to an int type. We have used this earlier in the previous class. We will say int and within brackets, number divided by 2. It will convert the division output to an integer, truncating the fraction part. The range function will now work for all numbers. Let us run it once more. Now, it runs without any hiccups. We are getting the same result as before, but it will now take much lesser time to execute. You can try the exercises given below. While coding, please consider 2 important things. It is not sufficient to have your logic just work, but it must work efficiently, using lesser time and lesser system resources. And it must meet the usability standards. So also think about the look and feel factor. In the next class, we will learn how to write a function, and how to adopt the modular approach of coding. I hope you like this tutorial. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel.